Sure. All right. Thank you. So thank you so much once again, Professor Vass, for having me here. And I guess I will be having a small session on how to enter into foreign markets, pardon me. Um, uh, and at the end of the session, I'll be happy to take the questions that you may have. And I always encourage it that somewhere in between, if you are unable to view the slides or hear what I'm talking about, please feel free to just let me know. I'm going ahead with the assumption that as of now, you're aware that um, the firm has been able to decide which market to primarily enter. They have done their cost analysis, they've done their benefits and risk analysis, and now comes the major decision: how do we really enter into these foreign markets? And this decision, which particular entry mode should be selected by the firm, depends on a number of factors. I will go through some of these factors, not in detail, and because when I talk about each entry method, I will try to link it to these decision factors. Now, some of the decision factors which will help the firm guide which particular entry mode they should be selecting is based on ownership advantages, the location advantages, whether the firm would like to have internalization advantages, and certain other factors could be the need for control the firm has, the availability of capital and other resources, and how much risk the firm is willing to take. So let's start with the ownership advantages. Ownership advantages are the resources that are owned by a firm, which give the firm a competitive advantage over its industry rivals. So, for example, if for a firm like Coca-Cola, keeping its syrup recipe secret is a big ownership advantage, then definitely they would like to go using a method wherein they have full control over their operations. The second decision factor is the location advantages, which is all those factors that determine whether you would like to have a production in the home country, or is there an advantage in shifting production to a host country? Some of these factors that you would have been hearing a lot these days are the tariffs which are there. What is the cost of labor in the home country versus the host country? It could be the cost of acquiring land. What is the government policy, the political environment, and so on, multiple factors out there. The third is the internalization advantages, which are all those that make it desirable for a firm to produce a good or service itself rather than outsourcing it. So, for example, now, whenever you try to outsource or enter into negotiations with a third party, there are costs involved, costs related to negotiation, monitoring your partner, costs related to controlling the partner. If those costs are very high, you would like to do it yourself. But if those costs are not critical, they are low, then you might prefer to do it in the host country or maybe utilize the services of the partner. So those are your basic factors, apart from the fact how much control is required, availability of financial resources, human resources, and how much risk you can take. Based on these factors, the firm has an option of either doing production in the domestic market and exporting, or you would like to decide that maybe we need to move abroad and have foreign market production, or what we call as move to the host market. If you decide as a firm to select your production as home market, then you have the option of exporting, which could be done indirectly using agents, export merchants, you could use a trading house, or you could do a piggyback exporting. Direct exporting would involve that the company set up a branch overseas or hire the services of a distributor and sell directly abroad. If the firm decides that, hey, foreign production is the way we would like to move into the foreign markets, then their options are related to two. Number one is, should we enter into some kind of a contractual agreement with another firm? And you have the options of licensing, franchising, contract manufacturing, or the turnkey projects. Another option is that the company decides to invest capital in the foreign markets, which you would have commonly heard as foreign direct investment. So the options here are the company might decide that we would like to do joint ventures or have a wholly owned subsidiary, or maybe enter into the foreign markets using the route of mergers and acquisitions of a company in the foreign market. So these are your basic foreign market entry modes, and let's sequentially go, starting from the exporting, we will move across to the FDI. So
if I just may say, I love this diagram. I've been teaching international business for like 10 years more, and I always talk about entry modes, but I never saw anyone kind of lead to those entry modes through these intermediate steps. I really love it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a challenge. Different textbooks, they do differently. Right. So, and because of this, as I was saying, I was, let me do this presentation in one place, because for the student, it gets very complicated. That what are you talking about? So I was like, all right, cull all the resources, make it as simple as possible. So thank you. And I hope I'm clear till now, and I can move forward.
Maybe if it's, again, I'm not sure if it's a good time to ask, but would you be able to explain in a few words what each of these modes means? I suppose.
Oh, yes. So that's the rest of our presentation. So I will go through each one of them.
Okay.
And I have, some little phrases written there if you would like to maybe go over at a later point of time.
Good.
So we'll start with the first and the simplest one of them all, which is exporting. One of the simplest ways of entering into the foreign market. And as we can see here, there are two ways that a firm can do exporting. Let's start with the indirect method of exporting. So here is a little diagram to explain that. In case of an indirect exporting methodology, we'll talk about company A, that is our reference company, and the customer is company C, which is based in Italy. So in case of indirect exporting, what you will happen is that a firm, it's not made it. Did I do these lines? I'm not sure what happened here, but definitely this is not a part of the presentation.
So the
something
allows you. Just a second, somebody got into your screen. So
okay, all right.
We should be able to fix it.
Thank you.
Somebody is sabotaging our presentation. So let me see if I can find a way. Now, if you guys can remember and figure out who did this, can you?
That's not me.
Probably happened accidentally.
I know some.
You're all okay. So I should be able to. Just a second. I wonder how. Go faster. So let's do the following. Let's unshare screen and then share again.
All right.
I have no idea. Somebody must have a touch screen and just accidentally touched it.
I hear that.
So let's just stop sharing and then share again.
Let me just figure this out.
Well, I think if you share one more time, it should be fine.
Okay. All right, I hope.
All right, yeah, we are good.
All right, sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
That's good now. So let me restart with the indirect exporting entry method, which is when a firm sells its products to a domestic customer, which in turn exports. If you can see here, company A, which is a Canadian company, is selling to company B, which is also located in Canada. And this company B is then selling the goods to a customer in Italy. And for company A, we consider this as an indirect method of exporting. Remember that if the company would like to be engaged in foreign markets for a long time, this is not a really suitable strategy. And we will also look at advantages and disadvantages in a few moments from now.
Yeah, awesome. What? You too happy?
Decide if the please move this window. So I guess we have another message coming up here. Are you able to hear me?
Please go ahead. So I muted people, so there were a few people who apparently didn't mute their microphones, and so we hear the ambient sounds.
Right.
Please go ahead.
Okay. If the fund decides to use an indirect method of exporting, they have a couple of options. Let's have a look at them. They can decide that agents and merchants is the way that we would like to move abroad. They might hire the services of an export management company or an international trading company, or use piggyback exporting. Agents and merchants are firms in the domestic market that accept orders for foreign customers. The difference between an export agent and an export merchant is an export agent will take ownership of the goods from company A. It might or might not take the title to the goods. I'm sorry, let me just rephrase that. In case of an export agent, the agent will take the physical possession of the goods, most likely, but it does not take the title or ownership of the goods. They are shorter business, relationships. The agent is aware of a customer in the foreign market. It buys goods from the prospective exporter in the domestic market, sells abroad, and works on a commission basis. Export merchants, on the other hand, they also buy products in the home country from the firm, but they not only take physical possession, they also take ownership or title of the goods. That means they can now brand the goods with their own company's name. And in other words, we say that they will be exporting on their own account. So that is the primary difference. And merchants, you would like to hire, use merchants if you want to do enter into the foreign markets, and it's a long-term commitment that you are looking at. An export management company is a bigger company as compared to an export agent or a merchant. It is a firm that acts as an export department for the client. It will be advising the firm on how to do exports, the legal processes involved. It also tries to sort the complexity involved in exporting goods into the foreign markets. And that is one option that the company might take. Unlike agents and the EMC, which are only engaging in exports, an international trading company, from its name is clear, it is engaging in both exporting as well as importing of goods for its business. International trading company are a big part, for example, in Japan, and firms like Mitsubishi, Mitsui, Sony, Sumitomo, which you would have commonly heard of, are basically trading companies in Japan, and they purchase goods domestically from Japanese firms and would be selling in the foreign markets. These firms, as we all know, are huge in size, and they might be having billions of dollars worth of revenue that they are earning. As a result of that, they are able to provide a whole lot of services like shipping, warehousing, even providing financing to the domestic firm who would like to engage in exporting. And it's a very big. They have a major impact in the Japanese economy, let me put it that way. One of the last ones in indirect exporting is what we call as piggyback exporting, wherein, if you recall your childhood, you would have had fun with your elder cousin or relative. So here is a smaller firm which does not have the resources to move directly into the foreign markets. For example, a little company which makes sewing needles. On the other hand, is a bigger, larger multinational, like maybe a Singer sewing machine or a Brother sewing machine, which would like customers not only to purchase its sewing machines, but all the accessories related to it, buttons, threads, needles. So it's a win-win situation for both these companies. So the smaller rider uses the distribution network of the bigger carrier company and sells its products into the foreign markets. So that's about the indirect way of exporting. Let's move on to the direct method of exporting. So we have another representation here. As you can see, there's a company A situated in the United States, and it is directly exporting to its customer in China. There are no intermediaries involved, and the company A can have a distributor appointed in China to sell its products to its Chinese customers, or they may decide to open up a branch office in China. They might lease some office space and get in touch with the Chinese customers directly. So that's another way of entering into the foreign markets. There are advantages as well as disadvantages with exporting. If you look at the advantages, if you would like to have economies of scale in your domestic market and you don't want to start a new production in a foreign market, well, exporting is a way to do it. It's one of the least risky ways of entering into the foreign markets. It also helps the firm to gradually learn about the foreign market and enter there. For example, Baskin-Robbins, a US-based ice cream company, decided to enter into Russia using direct exporting. So they would export their ice cream from Canada and their plants in US directly to Russia through distributors. After 5 years, they gradually understood the Russian consumers' needs and requirements, and then they went ahead and invested money and set up their own factory in Russia. So that's another way. Another advantage of direct or indirect exporting is if a foreign country's government does not encourage investment or FTI, well, then you don't have any other option but to use exporting. There's certain disadvantages as well. The firm does not have control over what the distributor is doing, or there would be limited control over what the agents or the merchants are, how they're representing their product in the foreign market. There could be an instance you have been in the foreign market for almost 10 years and you have absolutely not much information about your customer in the foreign market because you are going through the agent or the merchant. In today's world, we see these rising trade barriers, so that also makes your product expensive in the foreign markets if you decide to use exporting as a mode of entering into the foreign markets. And of course, the increased transportation costs, especially if you are selling bulky products. So that is about exporting as a way of entering into the foreign markets. So I hope we're still on the presentation with me.
Yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on to the second method, which is your foreign production. This involves the firm having some kind of direct presence in the foreign market, and as we can see from this little diagram, the firm has two options. They can enter contractually with another company and enter into the foreign markets. And let's start with the contractual entry modes. The first one, very commonly again used, is licensing. So if you can look at this little diagram which explains the process of licensing, there will be a company which is the licensor. For example, Walt Disney of US has so many products. It has copyrights, it has these cartoon characters, and they would like to market in the other countries because there's a demand for those characters and the products in the foreign markets. So they enter into an agreement with a company, let's say in Japan, which would be called as a licensee in our process. And the licensee gets to use the intellectual property of Walt Disney. For example, if you would like to open an amusement park in Japan, Walt Disney gives a license to a company in Japan to have an amusement park which can have the brand name Disneyland, and that's how you enter into the foreign market. In return, the licensee will be paying a royalty or the licensing fees or some other kind of compensation to the licensor. Now, what can the licensor offer? It could be their brand name. It could be like the Disneyland brand name. It could be some product. It could be a trade secret that they have, a technology which is unique to the company, or it could be a process that is unique that the company has developed, which we call as a patent. Any of them could be a part of your licensing agreement. Similar to licensing is another form of entry into the, let me just go back a bit. Let's quickly look at the advantages. Some of the advantages to licensing are that with little initial investment, the firm can not only enter into the foreign markets, but they're also earning a larger amount of profits as compared to exporting. And of course, you are able to avoid the tariffs which might exist, the non-tariff barriers, and it is lesser costly to implement licensing, and it's one of the very popular ways of entering into foreign markets. Disadvantage, of course, is the limited control that you would be having over your licensee. The amount of participation, once you give a license, the company is not able to then directly open up a factory in that same market possibly. Many times, and it often happens in international business, your licensee becomes your competitor because now they have access to your technology, the skills, and at a later point of time when the firm wants to enter using capital investment, hey, we already have a competitor in the foreign markets. And the licensee might exploit the resources to the disadvantage of the licensor as well. Franchising is similar to licensing. It is also involving two parties here. The franchisor who wants to move abroad, for example, one of the well-known methods used in food industry, the restaurant industry, whether it's a McDonald's or Pizza Hut or Baskin Robbins or Subway, familiar names that you all have heard, they move into foreign markets using the franchising mode. So here the McDonald's franchisor is situated in the United States. It wants to enter into markets abroad. They will enter into an agreement with a company, let's say in India. That company is the franchisee. Similar arrangements like a licensing agreement, except that franchising is much more, there's a stronger relationship between the franchisor and the franchisee. Franchisor is not only sharing the patents, the copyrights, but also the processes, the software. How should you be making the McDonald's patty? The entire kitchen setup would be provided to the franchisee. Advertising, marketing support in return for the royalty that the franchisee has to pay. So a very lucrative way of entering into the foreign markets. Third way of entering into the foreign markets is what we commonly call as outsourcing or contract manufacturing, wherein a company like Apple provides a technical specifications on how the iPhone should be produced, how the tablet, the iPad should be produced to its contractor in China. If you might be aware of Foxconn, one of the largest outsourcing company in the world when it comes to electronic products. So they have factories in China where they manufacture Apple products. This allows Apple to specialize in its R&D and designing in California, whereas Foxconn in China accepts responsibility for their production and manufacturing facilities. One of the last ones here is a turnkey project, which is synonymously related to infrastructure projects, building up, let's say, of an airport, an oil refinery in Nigeria, perhaps, or a bridge, or maybe a Doha International Airport that has to be built. So in this entry method, the clients, they pay the foreign firm, they enter into a contract wherein you go ahead and design and construct facilities in the foreign markets. Not only do you design and construct, you also train the human resources in the foreign markets how to run, operate, and maintain that facility. So for example, recently I was reading, the Norwegian subsidiary Intra, which has installed the tracking airline tracking system at the Doha International Airport. It was a turnkey project and another way of entering into the foreign markets. Lastly, we have what we refer to as foreign direct investment, wherein the firm is for the first time investing capital, its own capital, into the foreign markets. It could be having full ownership, 100% capital is being invested in a foreign country, or it could be through a joint venture wherein the company is investing a part of the capital and the other partners or partner invest the rest of the capital. It takes three forms. It could be in terms of joint ventures, it could be in terms of a wholly owned subsidiary, or mergers and acquisitions. So let's look at each one of them. Let's begin with one of a very common way of doing FDI in the foreign markets, what we call as a joint venture. So a joint venture is when two or more companies come together and they invest capital to form a new company. So for example, let's pick up again, since we're talking about McDonald's. When they enter into China, now the Chinese consumers are very different, their needs are very different, the consumer behavior is very different from the American consumer. So McDonald's, it enters into a joint venture with a local Chinese state company, which we call a CITIC, and they form a new company which will be marketing the McDonald's products in China. Each company puts in the capital for that. Remember that the capital share can range from 10 to 90%. Anything less than 10% investment is not considered as FDI, and anything above 90%, you would pretty much call it a wholly owned subsidiary. One of the major advantage of a joint venture is the synergies of operations. For example, McDonald's might have very good marketing skills. They have a very reputable brand in the foreign market. The brand awareness is there. That's their strength. Maybe their weakness is the lack of understanding of the Chinese consumer culture. So here is the local partner whose strength is the local production, local knowledge of the market, but they lack the globalized marketing skills. So it's a win-win situation wherein weaknesses and strengths come together in order to capture a new market. Some of the examples, as you can see on this slide, you have General Motors and Toyota coming together, Ford of US and Mazda of Japan coming together to make joint ventures. BMW, Chrysler, famous in both ways, successful and not so successful as well. Similarly, the Strauss Group Pepsi wants to enter into Israel, and they enter into joint venture with a local Israeli company to market its chips there. Advantages, your risks are being shared, financial, political risks. The firm gets to learn about the new market before maybe deciding to, at some later stage, go 100% on their own. Synergies of operations are one of the bigger advantages of joint ventures. You can build on the strengths of your local partners. And in a country like China, where the Chinese government does not allow a foreign company, specifically in technology, food, electronics, to enter on its own, the legal requirement is you can enter into China only if you enter into a partnership with a Chinese company. So if you want to capture the Chinese market, which every firm these days seems to be wanting to, the only way to enter into China legally is through a joint venture with a local Chinese partner. Disadvantages, lots of breakups. Joint ventures have their own share of problems. Not only are you sharing your risks, but of course your profits, your rewards are being shared with other partners. The the cultural issues that emerge between the two countries' cultures, and the management is unable to overcome the cultural differences, conflicts happening on profit sharing, coordination issues happening, and then many cases your local partner will become your competitor once the joint venture life is over. Wholly owned subsidiary, as we just discussed earlier on, if the company decides to have 100% of its own equity invested in the foreign markets. We call it as a greenfield operation because you're starting from a virgin greenfield. You acquire the land, you build a plant, you hire personnel, you manage those operations. Very much desired by the host country's government because of the employment generation, the job creation that happens. For example, this year, Foxconn has made an announcement that they will be entering into US by setting up a subsidiary in Wisconsin to manufacture LCD panel plants, and would be investing $10 billion in that plant. Advantages: full control, 100% control of the company. You have 100% control over your profits. You are able to modernize operations in the foreign markets. And as I said, most of the time the foreign governments encourages FDI, and you might even get some benefits from the foreign governments if you decided to do a greenfield investment from there. Disadvantages, as we know, it's a long drawn out process. It takes time to acquire land, construction. It is costly in the long run. One of the most riskiest, in fact, it is the riskiest way of entering into the foreign markets, dealing with government regulations, training of local personnel, and then you always carry the stigma that you are a foreign company, you are a multinational, which might be seen with some hostility these days, depending on which country you've decided to enter. And our last of our foreign market entry modes is you want to have 100% control of your operation, but you don't want to wait for this greenfield investment, the time it takes. So can we do it quicker? One way of doing it is acquiring a firm. So you take over a firm and make it a part of your firm. For example, Procter & Gamble acquired Gillette. Of course, both of them are US companies. It's just an example of acquisition. But if you look at international acquisition, many examples appear in the academic literature. So Volkswagen, the German company, acquires a 70% stake in Khara in Czech. So, or you might decide to merge your business with an existing company like America Online and Time Warner coming together. The difference between merger and acquisition is when America Online and Time Warner merge, they form a new company. So A plus B is equal to C. But in case of acquisition, the acquiring company does not lose its legal existence. So it is the acquired company which is losing its legal existence. Advantages: very quick access to resources. It adds new capacity to your business without having to undergo the wait time for a subsidiary. And the disadvantages are not only are you acquiring the assets of the new firm, but you're also acquiring their liabilities. There could be inherent problems, which many times you are unable to resolve. And of course, mergers and acquisitions require a lot of capital. So on this note, these are the commonly used foreign market entry modes. And I guess we can open our session to questions and answers if anyone might have.
Wonderful, wonderful. Again, for those who may be exposed to the topic of foreign entry modes for the first time, it seems like it's a lot of stuff and it's a little too much, and confusing. But what you may not realize that in about 30 minutes, we just literally covered every single possible entry mode, and it's a standard language, so you don't have to come up with a name for how to, describe your presence in a foreign market. I mean, the terminology has been developed. And so here we looked at about a dozen standard entry modes with a good review of pros and cons of each of those. Would it be okay if I asked you to maybe go to that original first diagram, and then maybe if we can take a look at 2-3 randomly selected partners from X-Culture this semester, and ask you to kind of go through this mode, and if you were hired as a consultant, what mode would you choose for them?
Absolutely.
Like, for example, let's take a company called Unicorn Clean. So the company is here in the United States. They make cleaning solutions, so like all kinds of soaps and shampoos for all kinds of baby-related products, fiber baby-related products. Like, for example, soap for cleaning reusable diapers, or again, cleaning solutions for leathers and other types of fiber. So let's say, and in fact, they are looking to go into a new market. And so let's say, I don't know, the students have identified a few new markets. I don't know, let's say Germany as the most popular market. So what kind of presence would they need to choose in that market to be most profitable? How would they go through this diagram when deciding on the best entry mode in Germany?
All right, so let's start with the most obvious one. What is the objective of the firm? If I understand, I haven't had a chance to, but this is a weekend task, look at each and every company this weekend. So first and foremost is that seems that they have a long-term interest. It is what we call as a proactive motivation that the firm has to move into the foreign market. The moment it's proactive, well, let's forget indirect exporting. We are not doing that. Let's move then to either direct exporting or foreign production. In case of direct exporting, so it's a small, I think.
It's a small company.
It's a small company.
Yeah, something's telling me that foreign production would be too expensive for them.
Exactly. So for a smaller company, so let's even ignore the FDI route, which is there, which would be subsidiary, not at this time, because you would like to understand if it's, and I'm assuming again that they are primarily a domestic focused company, domestic sales focused company, right?
Right.
So exactly. Now, when your focus is more on the domestic sales, then you would like to look at what can we do? Should we open up a branch office in Germany, let's say, which would have you leasing space, which is again investment, or would you, I would suggest to the company, why would you, let's look at a distributor in Germany, so that the distributor has information about the local channels, has access to the supermarkets, the retail stores where your product is going to be sold. Let us first try out how this new market is, because you don't have an experience of international business currently, and you don't want to take too much of risk entering into licensing, franchising without at least first trying out in some market. So initially, I would suggest to them use the distributor arrangement, hire a distributor in Germany, meet them, let them know what their product is. Very importantly, if they decide to select a distributor in Germany, they need to be clear in their communication. They need to have control over their distributorship. They need to have control over how the operations are being run, and they should be involved in day-to-day management, which is one of the most common mistakes a firm makes. They hire a distributor and then they think that the distributor should do everything for them, and you take a back seat. Never take a back seat in international business. You have to be there driving your business, right? And then later on, once you have gained experience in a few markets, I would then suggest move on to contractual or investment. But for a first-time mover into the foreign markets, let's start with exporting most likely. Then, of course, tariffs, and those are the other issues you might want to consider. So we don't know what the tariffs on these products are. If it is high enough that it will make your product expensive as compared to the domestic German product, then maybe you might want to look at licensing arrangement and give a license to a German company to manufacture your product in Germany. So that also depends on the tariffs, in my opinion. So these two are important things to consider.
That makes perfect sense. And I'm looking at other companies, production companies that we have on Xculture's list this semester. Like, for example, La Terrestia Colombia. So they make Colombian tea.
Yes.
And they have to grow it in Colombia, I mean, due to the climate restrictions. I guess for them, it would not be an option to move production somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Maybe packaging, but it's a larger company. But even packaging, I guess it probably would make sense to package it in Colombia rather than somewhere else, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. So No, that's where. So when you have, that's what we were talking about, the location advantages. So obviously you cannot have coffee production happening in Canada, let's say that.
Yeah.
That's not done. So you have to have home market production. And then of course, the same, you need to package your coffee, maybe you're also roasting. Now roasting could go anywhere. It could happen in the foreign markets. So we know that Starbucks, for example, sources coffee from Colombia. They have their own supplier networks, and the roasting can happen anywhere. But packaging of coffee, because it's the aroma, the freshness, which is very important. So you would be doing your packaging, and then again, direct exporting is again the way, overseas branch offices, distributor arrangements, and that's pretty much limited in case of this Colombian company, right? Or sorry.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So if we can just take one more production company, because I think for them the story may be different. So we have a company called Sakona. They are in India, and they make these big gaming machines. But then they try to export them into other countries, and the United States seems to be one of the markets they're particularly interested in. And
right.
So now with all the trade wars looming on the horizon and the possibilities of import tariffs on foreign-made products, so for them, it might be possible if the import tariffs are imposed at that product, would it be possible for them to consider production within NAFTA so that they can avoid the import tariffs?
With services, things get very different because now we are looking at intellectual property, and not that intellectual property, copyrights are not important for a physical good. But for the gaming, one of the licensing is one way, which very common method for a gaming company to enter the foreign markets. Now, Sakona, as we know, and India has the talent for when we talk about softwares, we know that India is the #1 destination when it comes into business process outsourcing. So it would really not make sense to have this software development being shifted to US to avoid tariffs, for obvious reasons, because it's cheaper to have software built, gaming software built in India. But then licensing agreement is something you might be interested in looking at, and you give the license to an American company, they design the softwares, the specifications, and that some companies like Nintendo do exactly the same, the Japanese company. It gives the license, they have the designers developing software for them. The license is given by the company for its brand name, for its characters, and in return, of course, payment is received from the licensee for helping them do that. So it makes sense having a partner in NAFTA, as you rightly said, possibly a US-based partner, and licensing is one way. I would suggest licensing is a better way for Sakona to enter into these markets. And if they are growing, then maybe they might want to look at a joint venture at some point of time. You could have your software development happening in India, and maybe you might have a local American partner who would do marketing and for the company. So you could have a marketing kind of, or you could enter into a strategic alliance. You could have marketing being done by US company, and you would continue to do your gaming back in India, I guess.
How about service companies? So if we can please do two of them. So one of them would be, for example, Unicheck. So they developed the software for detecting plagiarism, basically like Turnitin. And I suppose the coders themselves would always be in Ukraine. There is no point in moving the development of the code. But they would like to have presence, for example, in the United States for the sales purposes. So they want to have people here who will go essentially university to university trying to sell the product. So would they then consider some sort of like a wholly owned subsidiary, or maybe some sort of a partnership or joint venture with the local partner? How would you go about deciding on the entry mode for a company?
Right. So just because I was mindful of my audience, and I was like, let me keep it simpler. At the same time, there's so much of content, right? We teach this market entry as a full-time course. So there's something called a strategic alliance in international business, and which, depending on which textbook you are referring, they have different definitions. For a service company like Unitech, which is into softwares, I would suggest a strategic alliance. So strategic alliance with a partner in US who is aware of the education industry in US. Same thing almost as the story of the gaming company from India. So the software has been made. What you need is marketing. What you need to do is get into a partnership agreement. So a strategic alliance would be, I did not cover it here for the fact that not to complicate things too much. One of the ways of entering into foreign markets under foreign production is what we call a strategic alliance. A joint venture is a form of strategic alliance. You could have an R&D strategic alliance wherein companies come together. For example, you might have Renault of France and Nissan of Japan coming together for R&D purpose to make hybrid cars. It could be a marketing strategic alliance for marketing purpose, right? This is what I would suggest in this case.
Right.
You have a strategic alliance. I would still not go in with joint ventures. It's a lot of capital involved, and specifically when you don't know what the potential, the potential is there, but competition is also intense in the United States education industry for softwares, right? At the same time, you want your technical control, you want a backend to, because it's software, so you need backend operations. So where would you want your backend operations for this company? I guess they would want to do it cheaper back home. That's where your call centers, again, same story, call centers are generally found in developing countries because of cost reasons. So in this case also, I would suggest a strategic alliance, which is marketing based. You have a US based company which does marketing, and whereas the knowledge base, which is your developing of your software backend operations, would reside in your home country. So it would have to be what we call as which falls under foreign production, but a strategic alliance in this case.
Makes perfect sense. And one more company, if we made the most important thing, given that many of the attendees here are kids and they're working on this challenge, they're trying to design a dream school, a better school, and then one of the things they will have to decide on is which country they want to operate the school. But they sort of have a client. So we have the Finnish Schools International, which is a sort of joint venture between Finland and Kosovo. And so for them, it would be basically moving into a new country. So when you're opening a school in a new country, how would you look at it? Like what kind of entry mode would that be? So if they want to hire some local teachers and then they would like to expatriate some teachers from Finland, and then how would we even think about it in terms of the entry modes?
So now in this case, maybe we have to look at the investment of equity for this case. So when you do see schools moving abroad, you will find capital investment is being made now. So again, something like a joint venture would be, it depends, it really depends. If we go back onto the decision factors, there are a lot of things happening there. What is the strategy of the firm? What are the advantages that they want? So, but I can talk about what many schools have done. So you want to move abroad, two things are going to happen. Number one is you need a local partner. Don't do it alone. Don't do it alone for this kind of business again. Right. Secondly, if you are bringing your home country expertise, you have an ownership advantage in terms of the kind of education that you are providing. So you need to have expatriates coming into the new market. So expatriates here refer to personnel from your home country who have more knowledge about your product as compared to personnel in the foreign market. Also, you would need to train the personnel in the foreign market how to run that school. So, hiring of personnel would be expatriate managers from Finland, your home country, and then of course you would be hiring local employees, local managers, and training them. So joint venture here looks a better proposition depending how much capital availability is there. You might do it on a small scale, and so bring in your ownership advantages of your educational system, as we know, and then try to expand into the foreign market. So pretty much investment would be required in this case.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. I was trying to unmute my microphone.
Yes.
I know we've taken much more of your time than we need, but if we have a minute, if anyone has any questions about entry modes as you're working on your challenge, now is your chance to ask. before we go and talk a little bit more about the administrative issues? Anyone? All right, so we have recorded then this meeting, and I'm going to stop here. So this way, hopefully, for those who could not attend live, they will be able to watch it and sort of have a framework to think about entry modes. Again, each report will have to contain a section on entry modes. And I think this is the fundamental question students have to answer before they even get into all of the marketing strategy and whatever else they need to do in that market. So thank you so much for your advice and guidance here. With your permission, maybe I'll even steal his own word, borrow your wonderful diagram that shows, kind of the steps you should take when you're thinking about, when you're choosing your entry mode.
Oh, absolutely.
I always would go directly to the left column, the orange one, and try to think about it directly, okay, these are the options. But you're right,
yes.
some interesting immediate steps that guide you to that decision.
All right, absolutely. You're welcome to use any of these resources. I guess that's what our education industry is. And thank you. Good luck to all the participants who are there in X-Culture, and I hope you're enjoying it. My students love it. I mean, majority of them love it. There will always be a few, outlier students. We don't talk about them here, but most of our students love it, and you will enjoy what happens post your X-Culture experience, the friends, your cultural awareness.
Yeah.
And it's a great experience, and I'm glad that you are a part of this X-Culture.
Yes.
So, and of course, thank you, Professor Vass, for having me here, and it's great to be doing something different and not being in the classroom.
Thank you so much for donating your Saturday morning to
that's good. My son is away on a camp, so he's so I'm like, all right, I have to keep myself busy now.
Wonderful.
Great.
All right, so we're pretty much done then with the theoretical part. Does anyone have any questions administratively? I see there is a question from Harsh. Harsh, I understand. So some of your team members are not showing up for the meetings. I would like to talk to you guys separately about that. So I will send you an email. And so what we're going to do there is I will assign a couple of coaches to your team, and we'll ask them to contact every team member and investigate what's going on. Is it something temporary where they may be sick or busy or had just a tough week at school and were not available for a few days, or it's a bigger problem? And so depending on the results of this investigation, we will be able then to decide what to do. So we can maybe see if we can add more people to your team from the waiting list, or maybe even merge a couple of teams. If we have two teams of roughly the same age where only a few people are working, maybe we can merge those active people and kick out the ones who are not participating. So, but we'll definitely do something about that, and I would like to take separately at your team's situation. I know you guys, and so we want to make sure that you're happy and you have a productive team. Any other questions? If you would like to ask, just unmute your microphone and go ahead.
I see a question pop up. Somebody has a question about where the video will be available, so I guess you can address that better.
Which one is it?
Yes.
Can you suggest some resources for this sort of topic?
I don't have that question, but the good thing about internet is these are entry methods. You will find plenty of resources on the internet. So I don't know how you, I have a few links. I can share it with Professor Vass, and if he wants to share it with you, for us it's the textbooks, but if you were to, I don't like to say the word Google because you have all kinds of information coming on foreign market entry, but you want good academic information. So I can share these links which come from, some of the United Nations recommendations on foreign market entry strategies. And I don't know how Professor Vass would want to go ahead with that. But there's a lot of information available on the internet, and there are textbooks. So I don't know what textbook I can recommend for high school.
Which one are you using? Which textbooks do you,
Vass, I've been teaching this for such a long time. Textbooks, every new authors come in, and then I like to, when it comes to foreign market entry, I started learning from the book by Sack, Onquist and Shaw. It's no longer in production, and my basic understanding of that chart comes from that textbook on international market by Sack, Saki, Onquist and Shaw. Unfortunately, I don't see it being in production anymore. Then, of course, I also use you know, any international business book.
Yeah,
There is Alan Rugman is there. There is
right.
Griffin and Puste, which is there. We
Yeah.
also have Keegan. That's my course textbook. So Warren Keegan. It's a
Yeah.
Pearson text on global marketing. That's what it says, global marketing strategy. So Warren Keegan is another textbook. Pretty much all any.
When it comes to international business, I remember when I started teaching the course, I ordered every single English language international business textbook, and so there were 17 of them. But they're almost all the same. It's like statistics. They cover all the same topics, and they use, so basically they have different case studies and sometimes different order of time. But Bakhtash, I see you did ask about the textbooks. So I would be, Bakhtash is in Kabul in Afghanistan. What I can do, I can literally mail you one of my older books. So I have some, I have several copies of the book that I use for my course. And so, as I said, the newer editions usually just have slightly updated statistics, but they're very similar. And so if you send me your address, I can even look into the possibility of literally mailing you a hard copy book, and it will give you a nice kind of systemic way of thinking about it. Because as I said, they're pretty much the same to a large extent. Yeah. But so, yeah. And yes, so there is a question if the video is available. Yes, I'm recording the video, and as always, I will post it on the resource page, xculture.org/2018-2B. And so as always, we post the recording there, so you will be able to see it if you missed the beginning of the meeting. All right, so we are basically out of time, 1 hour. If you have any other questions related either, again, to international business or related to the project itself, now is the good time to ask. So if anyone wants to ask, just unmute your microphone and ask. And as always, if not, you can always send an email, and we will look into your issue later on. Yeah. I will remind everyone. Oh, Oleg has a question. Go ahead, please.
Yes, hello. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Finally, I had some problems with the sounds during last lectures. First of all, I have to thanks about this interesting lecture. I think it's a great way to, try to explain some not simple things by the easiest way, easiest and very interesting way. And even I don't have a question. I want only to add something. That, in my opinion, when it comes to entering to the new market, like with the case of Finnish School International, company which is specializing in providing some services, not product but services, they might to be even more flexible when it comes to entering to the new markets, because first of all they are dealing with human resources. Of course, every company try to organize their human resources as best way as they can, but if we are speaking about Finnish School International, about educational system, it's even more important than some other companies which are specializing, such as tea company or some chemical company. So I only have to add which human resources and flexibility in trying to open a new market is extremely important, in particularly in educational companies which are specialized on education. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, obviously there is a difference, right, between the production and the service companies in terms of the entry mode choices, isn't there?
Absolutely. So, well, the way the production companies work, it will be very different again for the service companies. The intellectual property, the thing that most importantly is your back-end operations, and typically for the back-end operations you would like to be located in a market wherein you have locational advantages of low labor costs, at the same time expertise. The language skills, English is the de facto official language of the international business. As a way of production, we know outsourcing, contract manufacturing. So if you are a production company, outsourcing contract manufacturing is a very popular mode of doing international business, which is not something, outsourcing in service industry is not something we hear too much of it. And I like Ole. He seems to have a very good grasp of the entire, the service industry, and
Right.
very important for the service industry is the people component of it and the physical processes part of it. So that makes it unique as compared to a production company for sure.
Yeah, we will try to pay attention to pay attention our children to a specific topic. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, yes. Thank you so much for your questions, and so thank you so much for your presentation on this Saturday morning. So, as always, if you have any questions, then send your email to admin@xculture.org, and we will try to help you. If you need coaching help, send your email to coaching@xculture.org, and